really excited about the last session because we get to look to the future and what makes us all excited about the building science profession and the opportunities we have before us. I did hear, I wasn't here earlier, but I did hear that the session around policy was well moderated by my colleague, Katie Kaluzny. We had a great program looking at calculating carbon footprint. I loved hearing about just what's already been happening in the community with the case studies. It's a great conference. It's a great group of people. Wonderful to be a part of it. I want to take a quick moment to just acknowledge the hard work of the organizers to put on a conference like this. I know that in my work, it's not easy to do as a professional, and for volunteers, I can't even imagine what that's like. So in particular, a shout out to Ajit for all of his hard work. So as Ajit noted, here at the end of the day, it does make sense to look to the future and what opportunities we have. The panelists that we've brought together. This is coming up.
This doesn't mean there is no future, everybody.
Sorry, folks, technical difficulties.
Well, as they're pulling that together, we've pulled together a panel here to look to the future that looks at just the innovations at all kinds of different scales. Because if we're going to do what we need to do as fast as we need to do it, we need big companies with international reach to be doing this. So we're going to be hearing from Jess Bolivar with Google. We need new companies to come onto the scene and look at new innovations and new technologies. So we've got Tommy Gibbons with Hempitecture, who's going to be sharing his experience. And then it only makes sense, and I think this is a really great way to close out the day. We'll hear from several IIT students to share some of their recent experiences around building decarbonization. So when I think about the future, and I think there's a couple of questions and big opportunities before us. I think of how do we go about actually fostering the collaboration that we really need that breaks down silos between industries, so we can do everything that we need to be doing. I think about how do we lift up the innovation and really put a spotlight on the technologies and the design best practices that we know are working so we can actually scale them. And then thinking that how do we actually just do this much, much faster than we've done it in the past? And this is something that I do in my work as the executive director with Illinois Green Alliance. These are exactly the questions that we're working to tackle all of the time. It is, I think about the founding of the organization 20 years ago, and the idea was, gosh, there's this thing called LEED, and it's really exciting, and there's green buildings. It was a very different way of thinking about where we are today. A few years ago, we sat down as an organization and started thinking, that's a great founding for the organization, and we've built a wonderful network of building professionals who are really excited about green buildings and sustainability. But we need to be moving much, much faster. And so how do we take the organization and go above and beyond what we've ever done before and start talking about net zero buildings and decarbonization and electrification? And so this panel discussion is an opportunity to dig in and start thinking about that. So one last point that I do want to make in my work, something that really excites me about the future, is that I'm finding more and more the people that I work with in the building sciences they're not thinking about their work as just a traditional profession anymore. They're really thinking of it as a mission. And that's really exciting for me because I get to work with so many folks who are thinking that way and are really excited about what they're doing and really want to make a difference in what they do professionally. And I think that's really important. So let me I'm going to start by introducing two of our panelists, give them an opportunity to share, and then we'll conclude by having several IIT students share some of the projects that they've recently completed. So first, Jessica Bolivar has spent the last 20 years working at the intersection of sustainability, business, and real estate. She's currently the Global Sustainability Carbon and Energy Lead at Google, which includes real estate, transportation, and food. Prior to Google, Jessica led her own sustainability consultancy, JPB Strategies, and co-led the sustainability consulting practice at Jones Lang LaSalle. Jessica has a master's degree in sustainability management from Columbia University and an undergraduate degree in architecture from the University of Pennsylvania. Following Jess, we'll hear from Tommy Gibbons. Tommy is the Chief Innovation Officer at Hempitecture, Inc., a public benefit corporation created to develop, manufacture, and distribute sustainable, high-performing building materials. Tommy is also an innovator fellow within the DOE's Building Technologies Office at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So thanks for coming to town to join us, Tommy. Before Hempitecture, Tommy worked in growth operations at Piper Learning in San Francisco and investment banking at Goldman Sachs in New York. He's also a lead green associate at Department of Energy Impel Plus Innovator and certified from the French National School of Hemp. He graduated from Princeton University in 2013 with a degree in public policy. Jess, come on up and join us.
Everybody, thanks so much for being here. It's as they're pulling up the presentation, I have to say it's such an interesting opportunity because all I keep thinking about today is how do we go so much faster, but how do we do that with the conflicting agendas that we have to sort of deal with, if you will, even just within the work that I do. So I'm leading carbon and energy for our real estate portfolio, which includes essentially everything that's on the back of house. So that does not include data centers, which I'll touch on today, but that's not actually in my lane. But you kind of have to talk about data centers because, of course, it's built environment discussion. But we really talk so much about these intersections. What do we focus on? Should we be focusing on additional efficiencies, only on alternative energy solution and procurement? Should we be focusing on innovations in refrigerant use? There's almost so many different avenues for us to focus on that. In a way, what my role actually is at Google is for our real estate, our transportation and food, is to figure out what is our strategy. How do we actually move forward? How do we make sure that we're maybe focusing on innovation, but not forgetting about measuring and moving forward from almost an operationalization perspective. So I'm going to talk a bit about our high-level carbon strategy, so essentially how Google operates overall, and then I'm going to jump a bit more into
This one?
Yep.
No.
Oh, can I have my clicker?
Yeah.
Clicker? Just make sure it works. Sweet. Okay. So at Google, we strive to build sustainability into everything we do. And so there are a number of people who have titles just like mine that do different things at different parts of the organization. There's like the cloud group, there's the Nest group, there's our products. But again, my role is really back of house. So thinking about how we operate and how we support the Googlers around the world. I'm actually new to Google. I'm called a Googler, so I'm 4 months in. So I do have some notes to make sure I don't screw up any of the specific details that I need to make sure I don't screw up. So at Google, we have a 5-year sustainability strategy. And essentially what this is accelerating carbon-free and circularity. So this is really making sure that we decouple our business growth from our carbon intensity, right? Making sure we can still grow, but making sure we don't have our carbon grow at the same level at which we grow. The second is empower with technology. So this is making sure that we are supporting the people who use Google products with essentially the most sustainable operations as possible. And then the third is really about our partnerships. So making sure we can actually get this out into the world so that we're not alone in this process. Our priorities are data centers, carbon-free energy, sustainable workplaces, devices and services, technology, and supplier responsibility. I'm going to touch on data centers today, spend most of my time on carbon-free energy, also touch on sustainable workplaces because this is sort of everything else that's not carbon, but we need to make sure that we're not ignoring the importance of healthy materials and ecology as we think about our carbon and our real estate portfolio. And then I'm going to also touch on technology just for a bit because although it's not in my remit, it's kind of fun to see what Google's working on in the carbon space. Do you have any burning questions? Please stop me. I'm happy to answer. Okay, so data centers really quickly. Efficient data centers help to serve our users in a more sustainable way. This is really the heart of our company. We spend a lot of our time and effort, and actually a lot of our sustainability efforts in Google started around our data centers. So we actually have an entire team focused specifically on making our data centers the most efficient as possible. So we have 21 locations that are owned and operated across 4 continents, and we are 2 times more energy efficient than the usual sort of data center. And we have really incredible teams that are only focused on alternative and unique ways to actually drive down that energy. Right now, there's a way of sort of computing this. It's 7 times as much computing power with the same amount of electrical power as it was 5 years ago. So we're sort of continuing to move forward in this way to drive down that efficiency across the data center space. We have diverted 87% from landfills, which is a huge sort of discussion point for us, sort of, again, the intersection of lots of different ways that we look at sustainability. And this is one of my favorite discussions. So somebody who is sort of a partner on our team is on leading the water program. And we spend a lot of time talking about innovative cooling technologies. Innovative cooling technologies usually use more energy, right? So there's sort of, it's less energy, but more water, right? So in some ways, depending on where our data centers are located, we really have to think about the trade-off between, in Arizona, utilizing more water-cooled systems versus using an energy intensity. So we spend quite a bit of time of looking at innovative cooling that doesn't actually require additional sort of potable water. So for more than a decade, we have really spent our full focus on designing, building, and operating the most efficient data centers possible. Okay, carbon-free energy, one of my favorite topics, an area that I'm spending a lot of time on right now. So Google's been focused on sort of accelerating the transition to carbon-free energy since about 2000. And in 2000, we announced the most aggressive climate action campaign yet for Google. And so in 2000, we started out with the concept of sort of carbon neutrality. And really what that meant was buying offsets. That's what most of the majority of the organizations that were sort of making these bold claims were focused on. In 2010, we actually started, there's lots of different things that happened in the intermediary between that. But we started to focus specifically on creating our own renewable energy. So not buying offsets, but instead purchasing the land or doing PPAs to have 100% alternative energy. Where we are focusing now is in 2 different areas. It's really called 24/7 carbon, which I'll get to in a minute, but it's really about overall carbon-free energy within the grids that we operate. So it's actually becoming sort of more granular and more controlled specific to the locations and neighborhoods that we source energy. So the way we're thinking about this is sort of 3 different areas. There's users, essentially who's using our products, partners, policymakers, researchers, sort of how do we sort of continue to get this message out from a carbon perspective, and then ourselves, so how do we actually do this across our operations? So essentially, again, this sort of breaks down that a little bit more. Like, what are we doing at Google? We're operating on carbon-free energy. We are deploying sustainability bonds. We are enabling carbon-free energy in key specific manufacturing areas within Google. We are supporting our partners, and then essentially the focus is on enabling everywhere. So we are currently the world's largest annual corporate purchaser of renewable energy, which is kind of crazy. We have a lot of friends. Maximizing our investments with high quality offsets. So this is really important discussion. Like, we're not going to have time to go through so much of this today, but I think a lot of people ask us about, and there's lots of teams that are not mine at Google, where we talk a lot about the importance of high quality offsets. But this is really a very big focus for us, especially as we start to think about our scope 3 and how we calculate it, what the boundary is, and what's included and not. One of my favorite questions that I was asked actually in an interview with Google was about my feelings on science-based targets. And I think they're incredibly important, and I'm very, very fortunate to be working in a space where we can actually talk about absolute emission reduction, like making sure that we are actually reducing our emissions. But it is important, I think, for us to be able to at least do something in the interim. Offsets to us ensure that we can do the best that we can until we get to a place where we can get to absolute reduction. So this will continue to be part of our policy for the forthcoming future until we can get to something more concrete. Overall, this is just showing that we're trying to focus on carbon intensity per unit of revenue. How do we grow, but make sure we don't grow at the same rate as carbon? Okay, quick one on 24/7, because I know there's a lot of engineers in the room that may be interested in this. But what we're trying to do is operate a 24/7 carbon-free energy everywhere by 2030. What this means is, as we moved from alternative energy within sort of the overall portfolio, what we're now doing is making sure that we actually measure our energy on site, by hour, and make sure that we are actually procuring alternative energy in the same grid at that same time. So what that means is a unique mix, and we talked a little bit about this earlier today, but it's basically trying to find a unique mix of energy sources. It can't just be solar, it can't just be wind. Usually it incorporates lots of different types, essentially, of alternative energy solutions. But a big thing that we're also looking at is battery storage. So how do we ensure that we're sort of looking at a variety of different technology types to actually sort of come together to give us this 24/7. So this goal is by 2030. And this is an example of essentially how we're mapping this midnight, morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and essentially where we have 0% match with carbon-free energy and where we have 100% match. And the idea right now is this is an example of one specific data center in Iowa where we have an average of 78% overall today. And we're continuing to look at innovative technologies so that we can raise this to 100 across the portfolio. This is just a map that shows what the percentage of carbon-free energy is across our globe, across the different locations that we have. Power purchase agreements, everybody knows this. Okay, I'm going to spend 2 minutes on this, sustainable workplaces. There's so many trade-offs with carbon, it just kills me sometimes. And so some of my favorite people at Google are working on things that are not carbon, but hopefully we can find ways to sort of tell the story better. Creating sustainable places and workplaces are good for people and the planet. Everybody wants to work in more sustainable places. It's better for us, it's better for the environment, it's healthier workplaces. So we specifically focus on, we still have LEED certification actually across our portfolio in a number of different ways, and Living Building Challenge. So that's sort of specific to different locations, but we've prevented over 6.6 million pounds of waste in our cafes. Circularity is a huge conversation for us, and we have some public commitments on this as well. 76% landfill diversion rate. This is from 2018, before the pandemic. 2018, we've installed more than 2,700 electric vehicle charging ports at our US offices. And this actually then supports our Google buses. So we have 40,000 CO2 savings by using our actual Google buses in the Bay Area. My favorite, we actually have like a whole page that shows cool recipes that you can use with like leftovers. So you can think about unique ways to use our food waste. And then one of my favorites, climate resilient strategy. So we're really trying to look at, especially across our data centers and offices, how do we really try and remove the vulnerabilities or at least mitigate, it's a risk mitigation discussion. How do we move forward in a way that looks at sort of operational consistency? And my absolute favorite is our urban ecology program. There's somebody on our team named Erin Beller who's got a PhD in ecology and who has created a monarch butterfly pathway across the West Coast, across actually a bunch of our offices from Los Angeles all the way up to the Bay Area. And it's really amazing to actually be on one of our offices where you walk outside that used to sort of just be grass, and it's now this beautiful, sort of ecologically diverse space. Oh, it's beautiful. And we want to spend a little more time focusing on the intersection of carbon and ecology. How do we start to measure the importance and also the decarbonization of these restoration practices? And we try to bring employees in as much as possible to make sure that we're bringing things that they can actually do that at home too. And healthy materials program, there's a lot of people on our team that were a part of the early stage work around healthy materials. Okay, I'm going to really quickly, what's on the horizon? We have this amazing new site called Bayview. It's in the West Coast, where we actually may have seen dragon scales. It's an example of we were using innovative technology for net zero building, but also actually that's an ecological restoration site that's really a beautiful story, sort of holistically. Okay, really quickly, technology. I'm going to try to do my best at this point. So we spend obviously a lot of time supporting innovation and technology, and we have a ton of different teams that are working on very unique projects on the technology side, really to make sure that we're supporting the people who are using Google products. So this is actually an example of the Geo team. It's getting technology into the hands of people. So we have 100,000 scientists around the world that are actually using this geospatial data to analyze the Earth. This is one that's called Environmental Insights Explorer, and this is really actually being utilized by a lot of cities to be able to do foresight and planning. This helps them look at carbon emissions data using Google Maps. So essentially looking at things across the board, looking at locations that are really good for solar, but then also can look at different types of buildings and predict how they might perform based on the types of equipment and size and age. There's some really interesting technologies and teams that are working around this right now. This is specific to solar. So this is Project Sunroof that helps estimate renewable rooftop solar energy potential. Again, specific to our mapping that helps us sort of foresee and look across an entire globe in the area that looks at like available rooftops. It's 107 million rooftops right now, 21,500 cities, 2 million informed decisions. That was my favorite number. And then this is one on Google Earth. So Google Earth is being used for a number of incredibly different things, from like beaver studies to water restoration. But it's basically trying to look at how it changes over time so we can do some predictive analytics. And Water Explorer. This actually has the most detailed view of fresh water on Earth. So again, we can see over time how water is changing. So we can use that scientists can use that to help make informed decisions. Project AirView, air quality. This actually helps to look at things even across to look at the impacts of what's happened over COVID. Helps us really look and map at air quality in different locations across the world and how that's changed over time. And then back to Google Earth. How are we exploring and understanding our ever-changing planet? Really taking a look at things sort of across the board to make changes. So at Google, we're just constantly looking to advance technology and empower others to do the same. And I will say, I am really looking for new technologies, right? How do we figure out where do we invest? How do we pilot across our portfolio the best so that we can really almost, it's like a biggest bang for our buck in a way, and looking at what partnerships we can create. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, hello everyone. It's good to meet you and see some of you guys I've talked to over email in the past, and finally get to shake your hands. My name is Tommy Gibbons. I am the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Hemptecture. I'm here to speak to you today about our company, Hemptecture, the products we're coming to market with, and how you guys can get involved and help us support this low carbon building materials revolution that is really taking place. This is a pretty small room with a lot of smart people in it right now, and it's only going to grow. more and more people are becoming fascinated with how we can substitute conventional building materials with bio-based, low carbon substitutes. And I expect that momentum is only going to increase. So thanks, Ralph, for inviting me months ago, and Ajit for helping me put this together, and Brian for hosting a guest sharing a panel with me, because it's quite humbled to share a panel with Google, because I'm pretty sure they have about 50,000 times the annual revenue of us, and probably 50,000 times the employee count. But maybe we can start sourcing some of your guys' materials. So it's very exciting to speak to you guys. I know we're talking about the future, and the future could be 100 years from now, 50 years from now. But I'm really talking to you guys about something that's going to happen 90 days from now. And this is going to be historic for our country, because the hemp insulation industry is really at an inflection point, and things are about to change pretty dramatically for us starting this summer. So what is the problem? And I was glad Tom got a chance to speak today, and I asked him a question. I got to talk to him more in the bathroom as well. Always an opportunity. The problem is operational and embodied carbon emissions in the building industry. Operational, we've known about for a while. How do we substitute renewable energy sources? How do we make the most energy efficient buildings? And now we've laser focused our attention on, okay, how do we actually use materials that have a lower embodied carbon footprint, and we don't put so much upfront carbon into the building from day one? Here's our problem. There are no U.S. natural fiber insulation manufacturers in our country. So there's plenty in Europe. We're talking about that Styco product, those Gutex products. There's plenty of hemp insulation manufacturers in Europe. But there's nobody in the United States. There used to be a cotton insulation manufacturer. Some of you architects might know Ultra Touch Denim. They're out. They don't even exist in the U.S. anymore. So our country deserves better, healthier, more environmentally friendly options. And it's conferences like these that are bringing people together to start to care about those solutions that give me confidence this is actually going to happen. So here's our solution. The lowest CO2 equivalent, and I know we talk about carbon, but use that as a substitute for greenhouse gas emissions in their entirety. The lowest CO2e insulation possible. And that's what we're out to do at Hemptecture. So we develop these materials, we manufacture these materials, and then we'll distribute direct to builder, direct to consumer, direct to modular home builder, these materials. And so we start with our hemp wool insulation, but insulation is really just the first building material we're picking up. There's an entire world of building products that we can substitute hemp fiber or other bio-based aggregates to lower the embodied carbon footprint and make these more sustainable. You know, our vision is we're creating the building material manufacturing company for the next 100 years, the next 7 generations. The switch that is happening today that will be in place producing bio-based materials for our country and our following citizens that come after us for generations to come. And that's quite exciting to be part of the generation that's focusing in on this change. So here's what it is. You know, it's not rocket science to figure out that petrochemical-based installations like spray foam, the XPS, the EPS that Tom has shown in his presentation, those have high embodied carbon footprints, right? By their very nature, they're made from a chemical that needs to be extracted from the earth, petroleum, and then processed. And then as you move down, you get to mineral vat, probably one of the most popular installations that you guys are speccing right now. And that also has a pretty high carbon footprint in greenhouse gas potential. And this is courtesy of Chris Mag with this chart, by the way, and when Tom was talking about the BEAM, the Canadian Builders for Climate Action Association that was ranking all these materials, this is exactly where that's pulled from. You see fiberglass vat, fiberglass, they get a lot of flack. They're not the worst in the industry. You know, they're using a lot of recycled glass. They took out their formaldehyde binder. Okay, they're making some progress. It's still a pain in the butt to install if you guys ever put fiberglass insulation inside a wall. And then here you have us, the hemp fiber vat, the only product that actually has a negative carbon footprint. And when you're thinking about the insulation, the tissue of your building, that's pretty significant. Most people will never make a volume material choice as big as their insulation. Maybe your diet over the course of your lifetime will be in excess of the amount of material your insulation is, but it's a big material choice. And maybe all the clothing in your wardrobe from birth to death, if you stack that up, maybe it's more product than insulation. But insulation is a big choice. So whether you go with an aerogel blanket or a closed cell open cell spray foam or mineral versus a plant-based insulation, that's a chance to make a pretty meaningful impact on your own personal and the building's carbon footprint. So here's why this is exciting. So I've been in this industry for 4+ years. My business partner has been here in the industry for 8+ years. And we are just about to open the first hemp insulation manufacturing facility in the United States. This equipment is Italian made. Textile equipment, it's arrived to our Jerome, Idaho plant. We'll be commissioning the rest of June and July. We'll be running product samples in August and code compliance with the ICC thereafter. And then we'll be to market with this installation that's made in the US starting in September. So this is really, really big for us to be here. We've already been selling this product from an imported manufacturer as the US distributor. And now we are manufacturing with American grown hemp, a low carbon, high performing natural fiber insulation product. So Chicago's role to play. They told me I'm on a Chicago panel, and I have to be honest, I could be giving this presentation in Vegas or Los Angeles, and it wouldn't look too different. But I mean, you guys are really the decision makers. You know, my understanding is this is architects who are considering low carbon materials, considering how to design more efficiently. And you guys need to think about, you know, what type of materials do you want? Are we looking for synthetic, super high performance space age technology to be surrounded by? Or are we open-minded to natural, plant-based, bio-based, natural low carbon solutions? You know, when we think about removing atmospheric carbon from the air, it doesn't get much more natural and basic than plants, right? Plants are the ultimate carbon sequestration device. Who's in charge of what goes into Chicago's walls? Typically, it's the architect. They can specify. Sometimes it's the building owner. They can wage a preference for what they want to see go inside the building. Sometimes the subcontractor shows up and says, heck with that, I'm not touching this hemp stuff. Give me my rock wool supplier, I'm going back to them. So it really takes a consortium of all the stakeholders involved to arrive at a new solution. And I know that's difficult. There's 2,000 simultaneous decisions being made on every single building project. You know, there's so many things you're considering, from availability to price to aesthetics to the subcontractor's ability to work with the material. We have a product that is a one-to-one substitute. So fiberglass is in the specification. You know, they need to meet R20 for a 2x6 wall or R13 for 2x4 wall. They can sub that product out and sub ours in, and it's just as simple. And that's the goal of our company, is to make products that are easy to use, easy to install, high performing, and have that by nature low carbon footprint. And then finally, how do we keep ourselves accountable to all these green building goals? You know, the Living Building Challenge, the Declare labels, the EPDs, Architecture 2030, which I think is now 2050, because we need to buy ourselves more time. So, you know, how do we keep ourselves accountable to this? It's not a question I have an answer to. I think it's something we can talk about when we open up to Q&A, but it's something that we really need to stress from the beginning. And I actually am pretty confident and pretty optimistic about this because, you know, sometimes we have trouble swinging big corporate clients with all these sustainability initiatives. I'll leave Google out of this because they do a great job. I always said if I was to be at Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, or Google, I'd be a Googler all the way. So our whole company runs on their software, so it's good to see those data centers. But I will pick on Microsoft a little bit. Someone sent me an article from CNBC the other day. Microsoft to build all data centers using seaweed and hemp. I was like, huh, we're the only hemp building material supplier in the United States, so I've never got a phone call from Microsoft. This seems like a pretty big initiative to roll out without talking to the only construction company or construction firm in this space. So, you know, we can say these things, we can commit to these things, but the reality is, as we're having this conversation today, there's people all over Chicago who are installing fiberglass and mineral wool in buildings that will probably get LEED Platinum certification. It's just the reality of the world we're in, and we need to work to change that. And even so, you know, I get calls from people who are going to be insulating their van, right? Van life was huge during COVID. They're going to be running around to every national park over the summer, eating ramen out of a tube for $1 because, you know, they're just trying to save as much money as they can. They're, you know, they're very environmentally motivated, and they'll splurge and they'll go above and beyond for their installation product because they really care. Nobody's holding them to a standard. Nobody's trying to say you need to be low CO2 on your van or you can't go on the road, but they're making that choice. Simultaneously, I'll walk into the Office of Sustainability for my alma mater, Princeton University, and say, hey, you guys just rolled out this low carbon building materials procurement policy. I see all these dorm rooms going up. You're not going to believe this. I got an installation you're going to like. And they say, okay, yeah, tell us about it. Low carbon hemp insulation. Okay, great. You have this availability and supply. Yep, it's coming right from Quebec, right to your doorstep. Okay, we'll run this up the flag. Great. Get a call 3 months later. It's going to be rock wool. Okay. Well, is there a justification for that? Is there an explanation? Because this is going against, you know, a mandate you guys are setting for yourselves that I can help achieve. And, you know, I'm an alumni with the entrepreneurship story, green story, a lot of wins. And they're like, our subs just are so used to it and they want to stick with it. I'm like, dang. If I can't get an institution with a mandate and a $30 billion endowment to adopt our materials, how are we going to get those, individual homeowners and those much smaller projects to see the future as well? So we really need to hold ourselves to task and really examine the decisions we're making. And that starts with people or the architects early on, showing these materials and showing this array of options in front of clients so they can make the best decisions for their health of their building, the green, the environmental friendliness of their building, and overall comfort of the homeowners. Here's our team, and we have a few other people that aren't pictured, but we're actually a 60% diverse company for our full-time employees, which is excellent. My business partner, Maddie, who's in France right now, presenting in Grenoble for the Europe-wide Green Sustainability Conference, which is, this all started with his fascination with the hemp building industry out of France, right? They've been doing this for 40 years. They never delegalized industrial hemp. They've had that supply chain in their country for almost 100 years now, and they've really been off to the races creating these materials. We can do the same thing in the United States. We've got a lot of farmland. We're at a very good latitude for growing industrial hemp in this country. There can be a lot of hemp fiber grown for us. And we've got sales technicians, growth operations, Dr. Brian George, who authored the patent for making thermal insulation out of hemp fibers on our team. Amy Christensen is the ESG advisor who also works at Google, actually. So that's it. Again, our company is hempatecture.com. We are to market with these materials. We sell them out of Salt Lake City, Utah, as well as Knoxville, Tennessee. We've got distribution all over the country. You can go to our website and order the installation. If you're shopping on Amazon, it'll give you a shipping quote right there. You can order direct, credit card, or ACH. And then just in a few short months, we'll have that installation made in the United States. And then we'll be coming to market with a continuous board installation, just like Tom showed that wood fiber continuous installation. I didn't want to interrupt you and plug my product then, but I'll let you guys know about it now. We'll have a loose fill option shortly thereafter, and that's just starting the world of hemp-based building materials. So you guys are hearing this early on, but the secret's starting to get out. Let's see if we can make these products industry standard in our country. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Tommy, and thank you, Jessica, as well. And now, to conclude the panel and to conclude today, I think we've got a really fun way to do that by inviting some IIT students and young professionals to share their recent projects and experience. So let me quickly introduce this quick fire panel that we're going to have, and then open it up to questions to the entire panel. Al Mitchell is a building performance enthusiast and works with FIAS in technical capacities ranging from research to project certification. He holds degrees in architecture, engineering, and architecture from Illinois Tech and Ball State. Brianna Galvin is an energy and commissioning engineer for Bauman Consulting's Chicago office. She provides service for various projects in building simulation and commissioning. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree in architectural engineering from Illinois Tech. Nupur Kansara is engineer and commissioning engineer at Bauman Consulting. She works on various LEED green building certifications and code compliance projects focused on energy modeling, daylight simulation, and commissioning. She holds a master's degree in architectural engineering and a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. Alana Bakrama is a PhD student at Illinois Institute of Technology. She received her Master's of Science in Architecture degree from Illinois Institute of Technology and her second master's degree from a university in Saudi Arabia. And her current research focuses on climate adaptive building envelope systems. And then Aaron Horta is a mechanical designer for Callan Consulting Engineers. He works on HVAC design projects throughout Chicago. He is a recent Illinois Tech graduate who received a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and minored in building systems engineering. Turn it over to Al. Right here.
We need to go to the other presentation, or?
Nope, it's all ready to go.
Sorry, ready? Cool.
No, thank you for the introduction, Brian. Management, I'm amazed they gave you the microphone to to try and let me drop some building science one-liners on you, but I'll save you all that hot air because I'm already a +3 on the PMV. Oh, crap. Anyone here heard of solar decathlon or race to zero? Just a quick survey. All right, cool. Quick introduction to this. The solar decathlon started in 2002, sponsored by the DOE as a design build competition. Originally, they trucked all the projects to Washington, D.C. and set them up on the National Mall as part of the Folk Light Festival. Now they're moving more towards a local build 2-year cycle. Then there was another competition they started called Race to Zero. That's the paper version of solar decathlon. So you only have to design it on paper and present it out in Colorado. You don't have to physically build it. And solar decathlon sucked that in as part of the solar decathlon design challenge. So IIT has decided to, or Illinois Tech, if you're part of the new schoolers, decided to start participating in these in 2016. And since the 2016-2017 school year, it's been a class offered in the Civil and Architectural Engineering Department. And we've been able to put together some interdisciplinary teams with architects, engineers, astrophysicists. I think there's been some business people on some of these chemical engineering students. So everybody gets in and brings a diverse education background into putting together projects. And we fared fairly well at these competitions. We've got second place in a couple of them. We're going to go into further details about these here. Some of them have won their category, like the vertical river office building here. And then also for this most recent year, they finally added a retrofit category, which is we're talking about decarbonization is becoming a more and more important thing, like the Carl Lafonte thing. Most sustainable building is the one that's already built. So I'm going to quickly talk about the projects I participated in and then some of my feedback, and then I'll pass it off to my colleagues to do likewise. So during my time at IIT, my first time I participated in the 2017 Race to Zero Now Solar Decathlon Design Challenge. And we had worked on a net zero house in Bronzeville, on the far south side of Chicago, on a 25 by 125 foot lot, which represents about 70% of Chicago's residential lots. So it's kind of a ubiquitous problem. And if you can solve something and develop a template, we thought that would be extremely helpful. It's an all-electric building. We've got passive house level enclosure detailing and windows from working with our industry consultants on that. We ended up going with a ground source VRF system. Ground source at that time, when I was looking at this, the hyperheats weren't quite out and in the same capacity yet, as well as there was no room on the site really to put some kind of outdoor unit. And then the VRF justification, and I think coming from presenting to a room of energy modelers, this is something that when you look at hourly output data, you can realize something unique about your building design. Because the building is long ways east-west, and it's got this little belt in the middle of this courtyard, it functions as 2 zones. One zone experiences early morning heat gains, the other zone experiences late evening heat gains. So by using some kind of heat exchange mechanical system, we can cut the input from the outdoor unit and shuffle the heat to the other side. I went on to do a Master's of Architecture at Ball State, and this was just an architecture team, but we also participated in this. And I thought it was appropriate to present at this as well. And as I think Jess had mentioned, the competing things that you have to deal with when you're working on these types of projects. This is a retrofit. There's an old historic building here in Muncie, Indiana, that we wanted to convert into a mixed-use multifamily. And we were at this battle between the DOE requirements to go net zero, improve our window efficiency, improve all of our performance, but then also the Department of Interior standards requirements to maintain the historic facade of the building, maintain the original windows and window profiles and window frames and the detailing of the leaded glass windows. So trying to work out all those details and how to retrofit that became quite a challenge. And we ended up with trying to think about some kind of interior casements, interior insulation on that. And everything we did, when we pulled out all the stops on it, we couldn't get the one building to quite hit the net zero target required by the competition. So we took the parking lot over and made a net positive building. So as a site together, they said net zero. So how did that impact my career and what I do now? I did a lot of mechanical design, energy modeling, plumbing design, a little bit of team leadership, putting together the presentation, practicing our presentation skills. And as mentioned in the bio, I'm on staff at FIAS now. So I still do a ton of computational energy modeling, trying to determine the next evolution of the FIAS standard, and thermal resiliency is kind of our new thing we're working on now. That kind of research and innovative environment has carried on to this, and then as well as presentations, like the opportunity to go out to Golden, Colorado and present to the best and brightest minds in building science was really rewarding, both in terms of networking and in terms of feedback and working on their quality of your presentation. So just a little bit of feedback I have towards anyone who's going to be an industry partner or coaching on a project like this. The first thing that needs to happen is you need to know the bounding box of the rules. As a student, you're not necessarily familiar with diving through the idiosyncrasies of 90.1 Appendix G yet, but it comes with time. And knowing the rules of the game, the constraints will force the creativity of the project, and I'm very dogmatic about that. And then also all the special programs that went into trying to pick this. So what elements did we need from the passive house standard? What elements did we need from zero energy ready homes to include to make the project hit its goals? And then just more time, spend time with students if you can. Take a little bit of half hour to coach on one of these projects and give them constructive feedback and help them out, because ultimately you need to build a generation of next sustainable designers and energy modelers. So I'll pass it off to Newbern now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So our team of 6 students have designed a vertical river office building, which was net zero mass timber building located on SCB's River District Master Plan, which is north branch of Chicago River. And so the key element of our design was obviously the mass timber structure, water source heat pump. We were using river water for some part of here in the water source heat pump. We had green walls, we had solar panels on the envelope to increase the energy generation of the building. And so we performed different analysis such as like CFD analysis to see the feasibility of natural ventilation through the FPM. We performed financial analysis just to support the competition requirement. We performed envelope analysis using WUPI, TOM, and LCA analysis and whatnot. We also did a lot of building performance simulation at each phase of design to make the better decision at the right time. So as a part of the project, being an energy analyst for the vertical river solar decathlon project, I worked on a lot of building performance analysis, doing shape analysis, daylighting simulation, whole building energy simulation using OpenStudio. Apart from that, we did a renewable energy analysis, etc., etc. And so being an energy and commissioning engineer at Bauman Consulting, I could implement almost all of the things I have worked on the project. At my role, I'm doing a lot of energy modeling in the beginning of the design, doing the shoebox analysis, doing the whole building energy modeling for LEED, code compliance, and any of the green building certification. Apart from that, I have been doing a lot of commissioning on site. So the interdisciplinary approach we learned during the competition, like working with architects, engineers, working closely with our industry partners, helped me really well during my role at energy and commissioning engineer. So small feedback on what we did on the competition, like the students can start implementing Python scripting tools and like to automation of the energy model and to reduce the time and be the expert in the industry. And they can also implement data visualization strategy to communicate the results of the analysis and to communicate better with the clients that can help in the industry as well. So I think that's it. On my end, I would pass it on to Brianna.
All right, so my project is Project Melody. It's located in West Garfield Park, so the west of suburb of Chicago. So we did an adaptive reuse project of an existing Chicago public school. We really wanted something that was going to impact the community and that could be widespread and act as a case study going forward. So we noticed that there were a large quantity of schools, Chicago public schools, that had been closed down and were now abandoned. And so we wanted to find something we could do to incorporate this back into the community, reinvigorate it, and really use it to its fullest potential even after it's no longer used as a school. So for the project, I was the project lead. I worked in a lot of different areas for the project, including but not limited to several simulations for daylighting, the airflow throughout the space, life cycle analysis. And all of these studies really impacted me in my career at Bauman Consulting as an energy and commissioning engineer. While I may not have been doing the full energy model for the building, I was able to understand the process through working with my teammates really, really deeply. And I was able to implement the leadership that I learned through this, as well as the collaboration that we all shared into the project throughout. In terms of feedback for the project, obviously for our project, it was really important that we did an adaptive reuse and that we were able to give back to the community that we were featured in. So the fact that this is now introducing a retrofitting category, retrofitting housing category for this project is very impactful, and it's definitely a great step. But having additional categories that involve retrofitting for mixed-use multifamily rather than single-family housing would be a great next step, as well as placing an additional stress early phase modeling. Early phase models are going to impact decisions, and it's really better to identify early on what it is that you're going to be doing so that you're not trying to make last-minute changes to get those 2 extra lead points that you need or whatever it is. So really looking at it early on is going to be good. Understanding the code requirements behind your building before you even get started, looking into a site so that you don't get all this work in before you do anything. And really just understanding the overall process for green building certification. So that's somewhere where, as industry professionals, we can assist students, as well as helping them understand what people are really looking for in results and what's going to speak to the audience in terms of what's important to them. And I'll hand it up to Nina.
Hi, everybody. So this project was in 2022 this year, and we're 7 students from different disciplines. So it's called the New Front Porch Project, focused in the preservation and report of Chicago last standing Phyllis Whitley home, located in Washington Park in the south side of Chicago. The project includes repurposing of the Phyllis Whitley home and the design of the community garden just near the site. Our main goal is to preserve the history that the Phyllis Whitley home represents and the honor for the women who devoted their lives to Black women rights and also reach the zero energy. As a result of our site analysis, the proposed program has 2 main parts: public space for the community on the ground and floor and the basement, and the residential program on the second and third floors for people in need in the community. So what I did in this project and what's my experience? So I work as an architect and I draw up a whole building retrofit plans. I was trying in my design to reduce the energy consumption as a first step. increase their life in the project, increase metal ventilation by changing the window size. We couldn't change the location of the windows. Work with the necessary partners was a new experience for me, and also work with a team from different disciplines. So the feedback that I got, I think redraw plans after visiting the site, especially the interior, I couldn't do that because the site was in demolition. Work more in building height because I was assuming the height in this building is as a standard, but it's not. Understand the community needs by visiting the site and also speak with people around the area. Spend more time in detail surrounding section and interior design. I think this kind of project needs more than one semester.
Yes, I was in the project team with Amina. So 7 of us students here. So I wanted to include a few pictures of the home we were working on. So as Amina mentioned, it's in Washington Park, located on Michigan Avenue. And this is the current conditions of the buildings. So you can see it's in really bad shape. The walls need some work. The roof's completely gone. And the west side of the building as well was in need of repair. So it's currently being renovated by an owner as we speak. But I just want to include some images here of it. So what I did in the project was I tried to be in a little bit of everything. So one of the big take-ons of this project was the building envelope. As you guys saw, it was in really desperate need of help. The existing R value of the building, of the walls, I believe, is like R2. So we really focused on the building envelope, right? So what we came up with was that one of our teammates came up with, hey, there's this new product called aerogel. So let's go ahead and use it. So we did, and with aerogel and a mix of some other installations, we were able to reach a R value of R40 for the walls and R60 of the roof. And we also did energy modeling. It was an open studio. So I've been working 4 weeks into chemical consulting engineers to a mechanical designer, and I've been challenged every week. It's been a really great job so far, and I do a lot more on the HVAC design. We do a lot of punch list surveys and commissioning of the building systems. So some feedback I would have is I would definitely like to see more site visits. Something I really liked is when we did our site visit in November, we saw a lot more of the building because we were going based off pictures. But when we did the site survey, the site visit, we saw way more of the building, right? We saw how many windows they were, what the really condition of the house was. So next, I would say is just early introduction of energy modeling, as my peers have mentioned. And I would say more collaboration across disciplines. You know, I see this now in the workforce that everyone kind of contributes. And I like that this project really helped us, you know, exposed us to that early on. So thank you.
All right, I'm going to invite all of the panelists for the Q&A. Got a couple of microphones. Yes. Green light, so it's got to be working. So thank you all. It was wonderful. I feel like that's a great way to conclude. One thing I was thinking about as I was listening to the projects up there, they're very exciting and they're very motivating, and it's easy to be excited about the future, but I know many of you are now transitioning into your professional life, and I am curious, how are you staying optimistic about your work moving forward? What makes you excited as you're moving into your career about decarbonization?
I would like to say events like this, as well as just keeping up to date on new products coming out and new things that are being released, is just really exciting. It's a great time to be in our industry right now, I feel. As well as with Bauman, I have been able to try a lot of different hats on, and really going out on site, doing commissioning work, as well as just seeing more detailed energy models and what it's really like. It has been able to keep me optimistic.
I'm gonna say the collaborative nature of the building sustainability energy modeling world. There's always someone on a forum with an answer to a question that you may have. And I'm sure there are a few trade secrets that someone is keeping locked in the safe somewhere, but 95% of the other information is free and out there for us to use. And it just really helps us better the built environment and the process.
Wonderful. So for Jess and Tommy, just thinking about all of your work and thinking about how you interact then with green building professionals, what do you think green building professionals need? How you interact with green building professionals that make you excited about what's happening?
Maybe just speak a little bit of the role. I could have put up a bunch of really interesting slides about specific projects that we're working on, right? We've got a mass timber that we're working on in California that's incredible. We've just finished a set of 3 that are intentionally low carbon and net zero. We have a lot of internal conversations around existing versus new, balancing how we look at sustainability. And in truth, my role is looking at both operational and new, trying to think through sort of the balance between the two. And so I'm enthusiastic and excited about seeing students that are working on things like solar decathlon. I actually worked on one of those at Northwestern. It was like one of my favorite things I've ever done, by the way. And so seeing continually students that are moving into the space, seeing new technologies that are coming forth that can be utilized, I think that's what keeps the excitement continually moving and allows organizations like ours to be able to pilot and then say, this is how things are or aren't performing.
Optimism about working with green building professionals is a question.
Or pessimism.
Or pessimism. Mostly optimistic, and I think it's optimism because there's a lot of open-mindedness. I think people are knowing that what we have now, the status quo, is not okay. There's got to be something better out there. I thought that was awesome when it was, I can't remember who showed the 1880s buildings were outperforming like the modern day buildings. We have so much more to go. We all feel the impacts of climate change. I live in a ski resort community. There's less and less snow each year. I mean, it doesn't even get more effective than that to make you want to change things. So there's optimism and there's motivation, right? We're all here talking about this, willing to be on the cutting edge, try new things and experiment. So that's what gets me excited, is that people are actually looking at this and doing the work to make it happen.
And just thinking about essentially a startup working really hard to scale what you're doing, do you have a vision of where you want architecture to be in 2030? And what are the roadblocks and what do you think is going to take, what's necessary to get there?
I do, yeah, that's a good vision of like architecture trajectory. I want to be fully honest, architecture was started with $120,000. I see climate fellowships, getting paid more than that annually when they come out with a report at the end of the year. Here we are, like launching a company with customers and revenue. Like, it doesn't take a lot of effort to tip that first domino. So, keep an open mind to that. And that's why I think when we spend on climate and all the prizes and accelerators and conferences, it's like, let's invest in solutions because it doesn't take as much as I think we think it does. And then, sorry, what was the part of that question?
Roadblocks.
Oh, roadblocks. Oh, where do we want to? We think we're making the building material manufacturer for the next 100 years, right? Owens Corning, Johns Manville, Certainty, Knauf, these guys have been making these fiberglass insulation products for 50 years and really not changing anything. And same thing with the drywall industry. We think we can do better and make a better product that's easier to install, less worker turnover, more efficient on site, and then wildly better from a carbon sequestration perspective. So that's what our goal is, to continue to innovate new products, expand to new markets, and really make the products that the building industry needs and wants and is talking about at conferences like this.
So much of what you were sharing, Jess, was just really exciting to see Google on this path, doing a lot. You were even talking about the 24/7 initiative is well underway. You've got that 2030 goal. So what's next for you?
So we've spent a lot of time on measuring, lots of meters. There's still tons of estimation that's happening in statistics organizations, which is something we want to try to solve for, but at the moment, we're trying to do the best we can with the information that you can in buildings where we lease. We are a tenant in a landlord building, right? So there's only so much that we can actually control in those spaces. So refrigerant analysis is something we've been focused on. The 24/7 initiative, so essentially electrifying our buildings and then sourcing alternative energy. Those are things that are being operationalized. And we're now trying to figure out what happens next. And so we're looking at partnerships and innovation in refrigerant use. So essentially zero emission refrigerants. We're looking at additional technologies, and we have lots of teams that are working on the material side that we sort of get the information from, but that's not the team that I'm actually focused on specifically. But we're thinking a lot about embodied carbon overall, right? So looking at how we actually make sure that we measure embodied carbon. How do we start focusing more and put more standards in place for our real estate teams and our construction teams to try and make sure that we're reutilizing existing buildings instead of always building new. But if we are building new, let's look at mass timber and try to actually put more information out there about their productivity and its actual performance. But those are some of the new technologies or new areas that we're really thinking about how we move the needle forward on. But a lot of it is how do we pilot in our existing and new spaces.
In the work that I do with Illinois Green, we're thinking quite a bit about how to connect green building professionals with policymakers so they better understand where the opportunities are and how policy can drive innovation. I'm curious, start with Tommy, but just what would you want policymakers to know about what you're doing?
It's a tough question because policy could help us so much, right? If the government said, okay, insulation materials need to meet this embodied carbon standard, then people will be forced to buy our product. And maybe that's the direction things are going. But I'm so hesitant to push on that pedal because when we favor one product versus another, I think we stifle the ability to innovate. And there's so much innovation that still needs to take place. I know that, the climate change is impending. There's a disaster coming and we need to act now. But I don't think act now means we need to mandate now. I look at the electric, I drive an electric vehicle, very happy with the car, but I think the industry, the government putting so much pressure on that industry makes other solutions like hydrogen fuel cells or like the Toyota Mirage car, less viable. So we need to kind of allow these solutions to come to market themselves. And I know that's frustrating because it takes longer time. But I think it's actually the best thing for us in the long run. So let's not give up, short-term gains for long-term innovations that may never come to market. We're going all in on this one solution right away. I think that's one important thing to remember when policymakers start signing legislation. And then, for our industry, I do think we probably, and hopefully this happens privately or voluntarily, we do need to look at probably carbon per square foot. I think that can be a metric we start to attach to buildings, right? There's price per square foot. What is the embodied carbon of that building per square foot? Every product might have an EPD. How much of that product did you use? Tally that up. That's at least a ballpark estimate to get you in the right direction. And then if you have that, I hate to say it, but property taxes could gauge based on the carbon per square foot. So buildings that have less carbon sink into them, and it could include operational if you wanted to. They'll be taxed preferably to buildings that have higher carbon, higher operational carbon. So, or you just, you can tax energy use, but there's a lot of ways to go around it. But I do think measuring probably starts. And so I think we're not that far off when looking at buildings, just giving a carbon per square foot and seeing that on Zillow when we shop.
And Jess or the other panelists, I'm just curious, what would you want policymakers to know about your work that would be helpful?
No, I'll really agree with Tommy there on trying to prevent one thing from getting pushed so hard that there's no competition left in that market for further development. Also, in terms of policy, if I could convince, there was that discussion of that Clean Energy and Jobs Act earlier. That's 900 pages. We need to make sure that policies are clear and distilled down for the end user as much as possible. I'm not a lawyer. I don't read lawyer. I read engineer. So having that work for me would be really good so that I can understand the rules of the game that I'm playing when trying to navigate these. And then the other thing too is we started to talk about that carbon per square foot. I'm all for new metrics. I'm all for exciting metrics that try and capture the thing we're concerned about, but we can't do a single factor analysis on anything that we're doing. The carbon per square foot, it's cool. And I'm not trying to start anything or criticize here. This is an example for my thought process is like, cool. We can build a 20,000 square foot home and it could have the same carbon per square foot as my 1,200 square foot bungalow. But when it comes down to carbon per person or carbon per whatever equitable measure you're concerned about, that one metric might not sum that up. So let's not do all single factor analysis and at the policy level at EUI or dollars or carbon cost.
You're kind of touching on a soapbox topic for me, which is how do you break down those silos between different industries, but also green building professionals and policymakers. And so that's exactly how I experience it, where the policymakers know how to write the law, but they don't know actually how it works in practice. And vice versa, green building professionals don't know how to write a law or implement it or read it, but they understand how it's going to work in practice. And so how do you break down those silos so that conversation can happen, so policymakers are developing policies that actually work, which I think is, a great thing to consider. So, yeah.
I think that's what Illinois Green Alliance does. So thank you, because I truly feel that's one of the benefits of the organization to help. And I think someone this morning was talking about the connective tissue between how we ensure that there are people sort of in policymakers and people who have access to developing lower income or more socioeconomic opportunities, to people who have more of a corporate perspective. Connecting all the different sort of pieces together, I think, is the answer to how that happens.
Thanks for the plug. I appreciate it. And I think a good example is, we're looking to do, some upcoming building tours of net zero buildings. Of course, we want building professionals to come and check those buildings out to learn, but we also want to invite policymakers to come and see that it's realistic and it's possible. So I think that's an example of how that can happen. Just listening to everything that you do, that's kind of giddy and exciting, and it's a little overwhelming. But I feel like it's an example of where Google has just an amazing ability to reach so many people. Where do you think the best opportunities lie?
In retrospect, I think I was trying to make sure that depending on who the audience were, there's so many different aspects of Google, right? Again, there's the cloud team, there's the Nest team. I think that Nest is one example, an area that I do not work in, but an opportunity to connect into people's homes and start looking at essentially how do you utilize and how do we make sure that there's actually the same sort of technologies that allow us to map our energy use at a commercial level. How can we do the same thing for a residential level? So I think that Google has a number of different ways. One is the technologies that sort of come into people's homes and come into people's workplaces that we can use and share with scientists to support water and ecology. But I hope another part is to try and utilize and implement technologies and innovations in a way that other organizations maybe don't have the access to, so that we can then share and expand on the successes. And I think one of the ways that we're really trying to do that right now is with embodied carbon and also mass timber. So in our construction, how do we try to utilize new materials and How do we really push the envelope at the intersection of carbon, but also with the integrations with the other levelers that you hopefully can look at both together, right? That's something that we really, I think all of us individually, specifically that worked in sort of the holistic sustainability space, something I grapple with all the time. You pull one lever, it sort of sometimes affects the other.
Wonderful. I want to open it up to questions to all of you. And so want to give you all the opportunity to ask our panelists some questions.
One of the speakers mentioned ESG, the term we haven't touched in this conference, but it's really like a hot topic right now. And people talk about equity in the morning, decarbonization. These are some of the essential elements of ESG. My question is, like Jess and Tommy, like to your perspective, what are the from your organization, what's the current strategy or how you're addressing ESG issues? The second question is, as green building professionals, what do you think, how can we support your ESG efforts?
I'll start, sure. ESG is interesting because it's kind of this like institutional Wall Street term for funneling money into companies that are doing things that get that label. A lot of people would say energy efficient hemp installation would meet that bill. We haven't seen any of that money. But I will say this, and this speaks to our customers really being grassroots. And I find sustainability is driven so much more from a grassroots level than a top-down institutional level. We expect the rich and powerful are the ones that are going to lead this revolution. It's not really what I've seen. It's more the young and open-minded. We did an equity crowdfunding campaign to fund this manufacturing facility. Jess, you're nodding your head. An equity crowdfunding campaign basically democratizes financing. Allows retail investors, institutional investors, anyone down to $100 could put their money into architecture and get a line on our cap table. Now, of all the ESG funds out there searching for sustainable projects and sustainable financing out there, none of them participated. But over 2,000 individuals ponied up and found, investment that we accumulated over $4.5 million investment. So maybe eventually we'll make that ESG marker and we can tap into that. But I think it's almost, too broad based that it loses a lot of the other solutions that aren't able to go out of their way to get those monikers. And then green building professionals and how we can support and work together. I think it's just raising awareness. I estimate like 1%, maybe 2% of architects in the field know about our products right now. And there's probably at least 50% that are interested in finding some type of better installation solutions for their clients. So, don't keep the secret to yourselves. Help us help you and help us get into more homes so we can be bigger, so we can supply more, we can have a larger supply chain, more robust professionals, more subcontractors that know how to work with our products. Like, it's going to take a big movement. But the good news is, I think once we switch to bio-based materials, we won't really be switching back. Or if we are switching again, it'll be something that's even better from a carbon perspective. So let's help us make this switch, support the manufacturers of green building products, not just architecture, many of them continue to do research and look beyond, right? There's Cara Green, there's Build with Rise. There is Matt Risinger, if you guys know him, he sometimes features green building products. So have your ear to the ground on what's out there, because there's new things coming to market every day, because there is this momentous wave that we're all trying to shift and ride.
I could talk about ESG for a long time. I think it's a very interesting concept. It's also, I think, why sustainability right now has this rise that we've seen in a way that I think is very unique in the last 2 years. And it's because Wall Street cares a whole lot about it now. And it's really just about risk mitigation, environmental, social, and governance. It's looking at organizations and trying to understand what are your risks and if I were a bank, how do I put on paper how risky you are? And so I think that we're spending a lot of time as a globe on reporting our ESG metrics. And in some ways that's really hard. Even I spend a lot of time thinking about embodied carbon. Where is our boundary? Do we include lease spaces? Do we not include lease spaces? Are we only including areas that we own? How do we go forth and actually move? How do we define what's a part of our ESG goal and not goal? And I think where this comes into the conversation almost about policy is that it's not super clear right now, and that even across different organizations and entities that are actually sort of measuring ESG, one company against the other, it's really complicated. But I do think that it's a good thing that Wall Street is paying attention to it. I just think it'll be very interesting to see in the future how we essentially define the boundary and create those sort of comparisons between organizations.
Hi, my name is Bart Clark. I work for a business, Finland, the trade promotion agency for the government of Finland. I work in biocircular clean tech. That's kind of my area. And so this question for you, Jessica, is we all specialize kind of in district heating systems in certain companies. So like there's a company called Fortum that worked with Microsoft to channel excess heat from their data centers to power large areas. Is that something that Google is actively doing or investigating, or what are they doing to access like heat and power from their data centers?
That's a really good question, and in full transparency, I'm not sure what I'm allowed to talk about and not allowed. I had to like get a lot of stuff pre-approved. I will say that I know that especially in Europe, as we're looking at full electrification for sites in which we do not own but are a tenant of, we have a number of district energy systems and cities that we're actually having conversations from the municipality level about how we can try to decarbonize the district systems in order to be able to essentially meet our 24/7 goal by maybe transferring some of the load in different places. So it's most definitely something that we're looking at site by site to meet that 24/7 carbon-free energy goal. Did that answer your question? Ish, okay.
Matthew Duffy with IESE Software. Question for Tommy that I'm rather curious, and this goes along the lines of different intersectional boundaries, but something very important. I'm curious about the advantages of growing hemp opposed to what I drove down from Wisconsin today, and all the fields are either Roundup Ready Monsanto corn or soybeans. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that, Tommy.
Yeah, absolutely. And our company and factory is based in Idaho. Idaho is the 50th state to legalize industrial hemp. So after the 2018 Farm Bill that declassified hemp as Schedule I, a lot of states, Illinois being one of them, looked very closely at growing hemp. A lot of people view it as effective rotational crop for corn, soybeans, or things that are nitrogen depleting, because hemp can actually restore the nitrogen. The reason why we are hempitecture and we use hemp as our feedstock, I kind of glossed over this, is hemp is a very efficient biomass producer. It sequesters a lot of carbon in the meantime, but it produces a lot of fiber on a relatively small amount of acreage in a short amount of time, using very little fertilizer, using very little water. Things like cotton, bamboo, flax, they can't say the same thing. So sea salt fiber, very good fiber, but it's Central America and South America. So for what we have at our latitude, industrial hemp checks a lot of those boxes for producing a natural fiber that can, has the qualities to be high performing, but also the supply chain to be not totally cost prohibitive. So that's why we're very enthusiastic about industrial hemp and the ability. Wood is another good stock for fiber. The problem is you cut down a tree, well, you've lost its carbon sequestration potential, and it's going to take 20, 30, 40 years to repopulate that tree. Industrial hemp, you can get 1 or 2 growth cycles per harvest, and you're supporting agricultural communities. Yeah.
Actually, that's a perfect segue. The follow-on question for you. So architects will specify building insulation, whether it's fiberglass or rock wool or rigid insulation, based on the sequence of construction and its ability to withstand water or outdoor elements. So with your product, how does it withstand swelling with water or being eaten by rodents or turning to dust after 20 years? How it's not a synthetic material. So how do you do that? Versus like cellulose that, I think has a lot of the same issues.
Right. So, there are things we need our installations to do. They can't erode over time. They can't catch on fire. They can't start growing mold. They can't be, nests for pests. And our product can do all of that. The fire retardant doesn't come naturally. Some of you probably know hemp burns. Okay, so we add a Class A fire retardant to the surface. It's completely, non-toxic, not a plus to work with. The pesticide problem is hemp is actually naturally insect repellent. It's a friction fit inside the cavity, so there's no burrowing from rats or mice trying to get in like fiberglass or sheep's wool. It's kind of like a softer blanket, and then get in there and nest. Our product that cannot do that. I actually use it in my house. I got rid of all the spider nests in the cavities that were there. Mold growth, there's a fungicide that's attached to it, but it's really important to manage your moisture because, drywall can mold, even fiberglass and minerals can be susceptible to mold at times. And so that comes down to just building science and being smart. You need to have a vapor barrier on the exterior of the insulation so no wind-driven moisture is getting in, potentially an interior vapor retarder so that, you take a shower, you start cooking, there can be moisture that makes it to the wall that way. And that's just about moisture management. The product's actually pretty good at diffusing moisture. So hemp is very hydrophilic. It will absorb and diffuse moisture through the panel. So where if you have fiberglass and it gets wet, it tends to sop and kind of sink in the cavity. Our product will actually diffuse it up to a point where it's not concentrated in one place. But then you need to be able to expel that moisture.
It doesn't swell or slump it.
Correct. Diffuse it, but you need to have a vapor open wall assembly so that it can ultimately breathe that moisture out, right? Airtight, vapor open. That's what we say when it comes to building science. Great question.
I have anyone here? Question for the young professionals and the students out here. I kind of want to hear from all of you. Now that you've seen the presentations from all the seasoned professionals on the design for Decarb migration, how would you go about some of the projects that you worked on before? For instance, Aero and Amina, the house that you have to design the envelope and the HVA system on the floor, area, and with regards to energy more than the commissioning. Would there be any takeaway for you guys? Aero and Eco-Savvy.
Yeah, I know we use the aerogel insulation, so I could just think about that, like why we picked it. So as I mentioned, the nerd teammate, John T. Williams, he recommended, like, hey, I found this super cool insulation, it has a low thermal conductivity, it's like really cool, and I'm like, let's take a look at it, yeah, this looks pretty good, let's use this. But then we started finding out how expensive it is, and but we didn't. Also the thing about the buildings, we looked into if we're going to add insulation on the exterior or the interior. But the thing is that on the north side of the building, there's a home that's really close. It's probably more like half a foot. So it's really like no way we're going to be able to, it's 2 feet. 2 feet. That's Keshin. She was on our team as well. So it's about 2 feet. So it was very tight. So we said, okay, we have to insulate in the inside. So we were dealing with that constraint. How thick should we make these walls? Because we were talking to Amina as well, being an architect, she wants the most square footage in the inside as possible. So I would say definitely having the hemp insulation sounds like a really cool idea. And if I were to work on a project again similar to the home we worked on, I would say insulation would be a good start. And I can talk to them like, hey, can you send a sample or something? So that would be great. Yeah, that would be great.
Amir, what was your biggest takeaway? You're an architect.
So as Aaron mentioned, the installation was the big problem. Especially, we aim to not destroy the house, the interior especially. We have a stair in the front of the main entrance, and we try to keep that stair. And if we plan to do installation, there's no way to keep that stair, so we need to change the location of the stair. And the rooms, the size of the room is it's really small, and how we manage putting layer of insulation and keep the interior as both. So as I said, this is really a good start to understand how we can use the new material.
Yes, I think the hemp insulation is the great idea if that goes really well with the green wall system we had. But the major thing I would like to add is that we didn't do the life cycle assessment for the mechanical systems. So we just did it like the overview and just to show that we care about carbon. But now that we have all the information, we could have done dive deep into it and look into MEP carbon emission, because as someone mentioned that it is super important that how it could impact the building performance. So, yeah,
I think that's a great point, and definitely something we would like to look into as well. For our end, our project was really focused on getting the community involved and doing something that the community wanted to partake in. So maybe incorporating more studies and how we could address that to not only our audience, which was professionals looking at our energy consumption, but more so the community and how they could get involved with the project, how we could aid them. We had thoughts of incorporating, it was low-income housing. We had thoughts of incorporating, a garden feature and all those things, but really getting more feedback from the community, I think would have been a question for us.
Two things. The first is the thing I'd take away. And I think just the depth and quality of analysis presented earlier, like Ralph had presented about the detailed life cycle carbon analysis and not trying to double count. When you go to that competition, the Solar Decathlon, you always sit in the other team's presentations and you're a little competitive with them. And somebody does outage thermal resilience analysis, or someone has some kind of crazy hydrothermal analysis they did. So always trying to find like the next analysis to help tell that story and build your case for the project. And there's, I never thought about MEP embodied energy as well. So there's more analyses that we can always add to tell the story and make our case for our design decisions. At the same time though, too, the project I worked on where we did the retrofit and we had to maintain the historic windows and we put a new window on the inside. One of the judges had asked me at the competition, she said, well, you're going to get condensation in between those two windows. And I said, no, that old window is so leaky and it's missing a pane. It's basically outside air on the other side of the window. I'm not remotely concerned about condensation. And working at FIAS and being on the receiving end of project certification, there's a project that slid across my desk that's a retrofit of a masonry building in Connecticut built in the late 1700s that had the same historical mandate to maintain these double hungs. And they put a little half-inch spacer to keep the window cracked, so there'd be no condensation in between the new windows and the old windows. And I'm like, hey, apparently we had a good idea back in the day, and it's going to get carried on. So some stuff I learned, and then every once in a while I run into something else that affirms something else that we learned through that competition. So it's really unique to see both sides of that coin.
Wonderful. I think it's a great place to conclude, and join me in thanking our panel. Hopefully, I'll turn it over to Ajit.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Thank you for presenting. So thank you all. Okay, so thank you, everybody, for sticking around. It's been a long day. We really appreciate you making it this far. We've heard from a lot of great panelists about policy, about analysis, about best practices, and now really looking to the future. So we just have one last thing to close it out for you today. We have the Chief Sustainability Officer of the City of Chicago,